The 2024 season has officially come to an end, and with it does Lewis Hamilton's 10-year-long, his decade-long career at Mercedes. And thankfully, it ended on a high note, because it was looking like it was going to be a sour taste left in the mouth after the balls up of qualifying yesterday, where Toto Wolff even admitted that they made a mistake, and an inexcusable mistake, by sending Lewis out too late. And of course we know how it ended with that. Bollard getting stuck under his car just to top things off. But what a drive from Lewis, the only driver up and down the grid which surprised me to start on the alternative strategy on the hard compound tyre, and boy did it work for him. And it's a race of what if for Lewis, maybe once again, as it has been for the majority of this season. If he had a decent qualifying, where could he have finished? But with a great overtake on George Russell, round turn 9, the very corner that he couldn't make that overtake on Max Verstappen in 2021 on the much harder and older compound tyre. He, this time, was the driver on the softer, younger medium compound tyre, and he made it stick. Thankfully, fair driving between teammates. George Russell, he defended harshly. He didn't completely give it up to Lewis Hamilton. And, well, yes, the teammates went side by side one last time. But it must be said, Lewis Hamilton is a driver who consistently gets told by his haters that he's washed. He is far from washed. Yes, he is getting older, as we all are. And yes, the senses aren't quite as reactive as they used to be. However, this is a driver that whenever he is given the car and the machinery underneath him that he feels confident in, he will always perform. We've seen that a few times this year. Silverstone, Spa, some decent qualifyings as well, where maybe Mercedes haven't been the fastest car on the track, but they've been quick enough. And we've seen that from Lewis. And I think for the majority of this year as well, Lewis undoubtedly has been used as a test subject, as most drivers who have announced that they're leaving the team and heading to a rival for next year are. If you want a comparison of this happening, well, just look at the Alpine situation there, where the breakdown of the relationship with Esteban Ocon and Alpine was well documented, whereas Pierre Gasly is staying, and Alpine brought upgrades that were put on Gasly's always first. And look at the second half of the season Gasly has had. He has been one of the outstanding performers up and down the grid, being very influential in Alpine securing 6th in the Constructors' title. And Ocon, well, his relationship got so bad, and his performances did, he decided that he wanted so badly to compete for his new team in the post-season test that he didn't even bother racing in Abu Dhabi after his agreement with Flavio Briatore. And this is undoubtedly what Mercedes have done. However, what Mercedes haven't helped themselves in is that they haven't necessarily been transparent with the fan base, that this is the approach they have taken with Lewis Hamilton. And I do get, to an extent, Mercedes' approach on this, because Lewis Hamilton has a very die-hard fan base that are very active online, as some other fan bases are as well. And while Lewis maybe doesn't necessarily interact with them on social media anymore, and he takes a bit of a backward step from social media, his fan base most definitely doesn't. And you've seen online a lot of really the attacks on Mercedes and Toto Wolff in particular. Now, there's no doubt that the relationship with Lewis Hamilton and Toto Wolff and Mercedes as a whole isn't as strong as it used to be. Hence why Lewis Hamilton is leaving to go to Ferrari. But that is what happens sometimes in sports. That naturally comes to an end, and you start to look forward rather than maybe necessarily prolonging a driver's career who's already had a lot of success with your team. Lewis, of course, decided to look elsewhere, which is why he's now heading to Ferrari. And I think this whole process of him being not shunned from the team, but being taking a back seat role in the team has hit him really hard this year, hence being no doubt eventually removed from technical meetings, development meetings and so forth, and having genuine influence on the direction of the development of the car and setups. And he's been used as the more experienced driver and as the driver who is on his way out as the test subject. And Toto Wolff's comments after the race to George Russell are a little bit telling that this has been the case.
George, you start. What we need to find out why the car isn't so happy with that. But lots of work to do, lots to analyze, and I'm sure we're gonna get on top. And thank you for sticking with what we wanted to do this weekend with setups and parts.
And that right there is an admittance that roles were reversed this time around. Lewis got the good parts and George got the experimental parts and setup and was used as the test subject, as Mercedes have struggled throughout this regulation set of ground effect era to understand how their car works. They've always been on the back foot, and they still are. Hence why they have such a small window of performance in cooler conditions, as we've seen in Silverstone, Spa and Vegas. Yet, even in Silverstone, Spa and Vegas, most definitely has Lewis been really in the subpar car or sub-performing car, and he's still been able to dig deep and get those wins and finish P2 behind George. Who knows what could have happened if he qualified better? The story of his season, really. But with Lewis, those performances show that, and in Abu Dhabi today, that if he has the machinery underneath him, if he has confidence, he will still perform. I've said this about many a driver up and down the grid. Zhou Guanyu, as an example, has been turning up week in, week out, knowing that his car is a full second off of the pace, off of the field. He's fighting for P19, last place. What is the point in just trying to beat your teammate Valtteri Bottas? Yes, you're still trying to fight for a seat, but up there, that will definitely take its toll for any racing driver who is in the peak series of motorsport. They want to be going wheel to wheel. They want to at least be fighting for positions that are meaningful, and that takes its toll. Now look at the pressures being released from Zhou Guanyu's shoulders, that he knows his seat isn't secure, but also importantly, Stake F1 bought upgrades to their car. He's now got a car that he feels more confident in underneath him, and the last 3 races of the season he performed very well, most notably of course in Qatar, securing those 4 points. And that is how fickle confidence can be for a driver when they have the machinery underneath them. And yes, there's circumstances this year or races this year that you can go back to as a data point of when Lewis, who is a driver that definitely wears his heart on his sleeve, you can definitely see when he's feeling down in interviews and when he's feeling more buoyant. And you look at the times he's felt more buoyant, he has definitely performed better on the race day. But even saying that, even when he hasn't been that confident in the car underneath him and that buoyant, so often in his career alongside, or his time as a teammate to George Russell, has he qualified below George Russell and yet still finished 1 position behind him or in front of him. And this race actually means that George Russell wasn't able to beat Lewis Hamilton over his 3-year time as a teammate of Lewis Hamilton. 697 points to George Russell's 695. Not bad for a driver that's completely washed and aging. Yes, he is 40 next year. Yes, of course, he will no doubt naturally get slower as time goes on, but you don't see people making these comments about Fernando Alonso, do you? And people say if you give him the car, he'll be able to win Drivers' World Championships and race wins consistently. And I tend to agree with that. I still think Fernando Alonso has it as well, but he's been driving an absolute shitbox in the form of Aston Martin, and a team that just, gave up halfway through the year because they were in no man's land, quicker than the rest of the field behind them, but not quick enough to compete with the top 4 teams. So, I think next year, 2025 for Lewis, he's going to be joining a team that is definitely on the up. Fred Vasseur has righted that ship of Ferrari, and Ferrari could quite comfortably have challenged for both the Drivers' Championship and won the Constructors comfortably this year if they didn't really have that lull point in the middle of the season, especially with Charles Leclerc, where he had 3 DNFs or 0-point finishes in 4 races, which was absolutely shocking, right after the high of winning his home Grand Prix in Monaco. So yes, looking forward to next season for Lewis Hamilton in 2025. I think given a car and a fresh new environment, it's not going to be easy because he's only known Mercedes for the last 10 years and he's moving to a team that is based in Italy and of course a different language to converse with, but I'm sure the language that they all speak is racing and quick times, and Ferrari love that. And I'm sure Fred Vasseur is really looking forward to joining up with his former junior team member driver back in the day when he managed him in F3 and in F2. And yes, hopefully he can round off his own career, Fred Vasseur, with a Drivers' Championship win with either Lewis Hamilton or Charles Leclerc, because I think Ferrari are going to be very good next season, as are McLaren. Who knows, Mercedes may pick up their ideas as well. I think they're still going to be more on the back foot, as they have been for the majority of this regulation set. Just that little bit behind. And of course, never rule out Max Verstappen in even a struggling Red Bull. But thoroughly looking forward to 2025 and a revitalised Lewis Hamilton. And thankfully, he got the swan song that he deserved in Abu Dhabi with his last race at Mercedes.